Well, let's really put this in the context of John Carpenter's career. Like, what do you think this represents? Is this maybe a last gasp for John Carpenter's career as a hit maker? Is it like some people think that his career was really just winding down before this? There wasn't really going to be a chance to turn that ship around. Other people think, this movie was a hit. Critics actually seem to enjoy it. Gene Siskel, of all people, gave it a great review. Thought James Woods gave like one of the best performances of his career. So there was like encouragement for John Carpenter after this movie. I'm just wondering, could he have come back from that with this movie? Because some people think it's like a final nail in the coffin.
It's a difficult question to answer because I think when the era of movies ended that fit John Carpenter as well as they did, I think it became harder for him to make movies. Honestly, I think he would have had more chance. I think he'd have more of a chance succeeding making movies like he used to today than making, like than taking chances in in his career like he did in the 90s. I mean, arguably you could say that the movies, from the 90s into the 2000s, even into the 2010s when he did The Ward, like those are chances. I mean, he's not playing it safe. He's not doing movies exactly the way that he used to do. He's seeing a grander vision. He's working with bigger budgets. When he's not working with bigger budgets, he's trying to do bigger things in the movies. I think, honestly, I don't think he could have come back until the nostalgia for 80s movies is as high as it is right now. Like, it's not right now as in like it's at its peak right now, but I mean, for the last several years, people have been praising the hell out of movies from the 1980s. And I feel like that's where his style was at its strongest. Maybe not his direction. I mean, you could argue, a lot of people say now that The Thing is his best movie. I know that was in the 80s, but most people, I feel like, off the rip know him for Halloween, no?
Well, it depends, right? It depends on who you ask. Before 2010, I would have bet that people knew him more for maybe Escape from New York, or I think there were some movies of his that at the time represented bigger chapters in his career that now are eclipsed for the love of Halloween. Like, I
I
don't
know
know.
my dad, when I bring him up, will say Big Trouble in Little China.
I think he's always been defined by horror, but I thought that his biggest hits were outside of that genre for a while. But people are always rewriting history or reevaluating history. So I used to think of him as a more adaptable guy. I think he tried to prove that, just didn't work out at the time. But even in this one, gross little vampire movie, you can see all of those influences that he could have doubled down on if given the chance. He could have made a Western. He could have made an action movie. This is more of an action movie than anything else.
I'm kind of surprised that he hasn't come back to make something in the last, I don't know,
Oh, he's
6 years.
done. No, he's done.
And I know it's because of how he feels about movies, but it's like the way that people get movies made now. Like, it feels like it's not exactly the same. Mostly because of how things will live on the internet or grow on the internet and things like that. But the way that people are making movies now is very and I don't know if this is something, I don't know if this is a hot take, but it's kind of reminiscent of how horror was when John Carpenter ended up making Halloween. I mean, like, horror is not in the same place, but you're seeing the rise of these independent horror movies,
Yeah.
to a point that we've never seen it before. I mean, Terrifier is the biggest example that I can think of where it's like made for a very low budget comparatively, gets released into theaters, and not only does it succeed enough with horror fans, but it blows up. People are talking about it on Good Morning America, and then these new Winnie the Pooh movies, they have a whole universe of horror movies that they're going to make out of this.
I disagree with you on one crucial thing, which is I don't think having a hit like Terrifier opens up the gates to other opportunities like it did. I mean, off of the strength of Halloween, The Fog, um, and off of those hits in horror, John Carpenter got to make uh, Escape from New York. He got to make Starman. He
Oh
got to make
no,
Trouble in Little China, and I just
it doesn't allow for a branch out like it used to, I don't think. But the branch outs still do exist today out of horror, not necessarily from the indie horror making side, but like even independent filmmakers at this point can make a good profit in their movies. They don't have to spend a whole lot of money. I mean, hate to go back to the guy. We do it every episode, but Rob's a good example of that. I mean, 31 is not a beloved movie, but guess what? He made money off of 31. He
yeah,
crowdsourced that movie and he made money off of it. He made money off of Three from Hell.
yeah, but I think he's also a good example of just how hard this business is on its directors. I mean,
Oh yeah.
he at one point, had the keys to the kingdom. He was working on huge IP, and then now he has to, for that he had to crowdsource, and then, he he got the Munsters, but he couldn't get it into theaters. He had to release
And
it on
let's be
Netflix.
real. I mean, we covered the Munsters on the show, and I like the Munsters, but like he barely got. I mean, he got it, but he barely they barely paid enough for this movie to be made.
Exactly, and that's even with
Yeah.
the sacred IP. But this is a movie, Vampires, that is lost in time. Like this is like a movie that has nothing to do with any of the trends that we are talking about. It is, and this sounds like a strong word for a movie that, isn't it's not a gift from God, but it still feels like a miracle to me that a movie like this got made when it did by a man who did not have a lot of influence, at the time. People say you're only as good as your last movie. His last movie was Escape from LA, and the name John Carpenter just didn't carry a lot of weight after that, unfortunately. And that's a movie I would nominate for this show because I adore that movie. Not a lot of people do. Even now, people
It
have not.
actually has the same rating as this on Letterboxd.
That's surprising. I feel like people have not softened up to Escape from LA. It's kind of the "you ruined my childhood" thing. Like, oh, I thought Escape from New York was the most badass movie ever. Then you made it a total joke, man. Or maybe the movie about a guy named Snake who has an eye patch and has to save a British American president. Maybe that was actually more tongue in cheek than you remember. I don't know.